So, AJ, good morning or good evening in your case.
Hello.
Okay, so for my end, we are already morning. It's already 8 a.m. right now. In your
Yep,
place, I think it's 9 p.m.
I got myself all jazzed up for the interview. I listened to music, I watched TV. I'm like, I need my energy up for this interview, otherwise I'm gonna sound half asleep.
Oh, well, I woke up and got myself some weird type of tea. It's called a
Mm.
pistachio and cocoa. I don't think if you can see it, but there it is, a pistachio and cocoa. It actually tastes better than it sounds because it has a
Yeah.
variety of things, and it's like my morning kind of jazz up
Mm.
things. I'm running out of coffee. But for today's episode, I'd like you to introduce yourself to the guests in a nutshell. Who is Andre Gress?
Well, first off, hello everyone. Hope we're all doing well and having a good holiday so far. I am from British Columbia, Canada. I've always lived in a small town which is called Alder Grove, and it has changed over time. It went from being very rustic to a bit more modern slowly. Obviously, it has a lot of history, so I have seen my hometown really evolve since I was a kid. I am half Egyptian and half Greek, so there's that. I mean, people always ask me what's my ethnicity, even though I'm like, can you tell? I don't look Greek to you. People say either Italian or Filipino for some reason. But anyway, uh, as for who I am as a person, like outside of being an author, I would say that I'm emotionally transparent and I wear my heart on my sleeve. So
Mhm.
I'm used to being uh, open and trusting with people. Sometimes it gets me in trouble, but I learned to to judge myself and others so I don't get myself in too much trouble. Um, I kind of a random fact. I do have a sweet tooth, so
Mhm.
it's a bit dangerous during holidays. um, what else can I tell you about myself? Well, obviously, I'm a big reader. I did lose my love of reading for a little bit, but once I started educating myself on storytelling and understanding the value of life and the things I've learned from books, whether they're fiction or nonfiction, that's what reignited my flame for reading and diversifying it. Obviously, I mean, when I ask my readers, how would they describe my style of writing, they say it's a combination of J.K. Rowling and Stephen King, which are such opposites, but
Mhm.
I guess it works that way. I've been through a lot in my life,
Mhm.
and that's what I incorporate into my writing, which is basically how to deal with whatever hardships or even the good stuff in life, and to use your decision making to have a better life.
Okay, Andre, let's take it all back to the beginning.
Mhm.
How were you growing up? Because you just told us that you're half Egyptian, half Greek. Tell us about your childhood because those are two different cultures. And especially being in Canada, that's like a whole new
Yeah.
aspect. It's not like being in other parts of the world. So, how
Mhm.
were you growing up? How was your childhood?
Well, I mean, I grew up in Canada, so I didn't really. I mean, I did obviously go on family trips and saw all of my relatives in Egypt. And I only went to Greece once. That was by chance with my family. But in terms of how those cultures and my upbringing from my parents, it crafted my childhood, I would say that it was very honest.
Mhm.
Like obviously our parents allowed us to be children and have fun, but when it came to their the parent in them, they were always educational and forthcoming and very uh action before words when it came to I guess expressing their compassion and love for us, because unlike Western culture, Egyptians, I wouldn't say loud, loud and harsh. but I would say very direct.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just how they were brought up. And of course, as my sister and I got older, we became more and more invested in Western culture, meaning we were looking more for compassion and emotional support from our parents rather than being constantly educated. So in our youth, it was always fun and games, but when we were getting older and started to think for ourselves, we were more trusting of each other than rely on the lessons we got from our parents. We were trying to really grow up and show to our parents that we can stand on our own two feet.
Mm-hmm. And I believe on that aspect, it's not only the Egyptian aspect, because for me, being African, especially not just being Black, being African, I think something that differentiates the Western culture from Africans, Egyptians, Asians, and even Latinos especially is that parental structures when it comes to Western or even any other culture, depending on how they bring up their kids, is that when it comes to you and me, we have more direct parents. We have parents who believe in education, parents who believe in
Mhm.
discipline, parents who believe in you can't make a living without actually having an education. And I think that's the
Yeah.
difference between having Western cultured parents and actually African parents or Egyptian parents or Middle Eastern parents or even Asian parents, because those parents are like one big bundle. It's like they came from one cocoon of
Yeah.
you have to discipline your child, you have to educate your child because your
Hmm.
child is
Yeah.
nothing without education. But when it comes
Hmm.
to the Western culture is like, oh, your child can have fun, your child can do whatever they do. Because as for me, even doing this podcast right now, it took me a moment, like a whole moment to just explain what I'm even doing. And that was even back in
Yeah.
2020. I took even a moment to just explain to them what I'm doing. And it wouldn't
Mm.
be a waste of time or be an interference with my education or my dreams. So I understand you completely when it comes to that. And when it comes to you and your sister, would you say that you discovered your passion of writing because of the connection you had with her?
No, actually, so my writing wasn't what I've always wanted to do. I went through different phases before writing. I wanted to do anything that had to do with cooking or be a journalist, a film director. But what sparked my interest in writing was actually the loss of my mother, which was almost 8 years ago. And so at first, it was just me trying to find some kind of creative outlet to work through my grief. And then it evolved into, um, I guess, expanding the scope, not just of how I deal with my trauma, but how I perceive it and how others perceive it. And I guess I'm still trying to wrap things up, I guess, after all this time, because my series that I'm always talking about, Boone and Jacque, is basically my catalyst for working through all of that and evolving as a person to I guess really uh evolve not just as a human being but as a writer as well, because to me, in order to uh vary and enrich my writing, I have to really work through this, because otherwise my writing will become about my pain rather than the character's pain. And that to me is kind of selfish, that I'm making it about my pain rather than the character's pain. I mean, over time, I learned to separate myself from my writing,
Mhm.
but of course, it's going to be a natural human instinct for me to draw from something real, just like any actor would when they're trying to convey emotion to the audience. But there's still supposed to be some kind of purposeful disconnect between you and the characters you create, because it's about creating new lives, not uh, reinterpreting your own. Because if you reinterpret your own life into another character, it's just some cardboard cutout of you rather than a new person. Because the important thing about character in the craft of writing is that you're creating a new life. You're giving them their own breath, their own personality, their own decision making, uh, and even their own world. And that's what makes a book memorable.
Okay, Andre, and when it comes to your books specifically, you mentioned that people often say that it's a mix between Stephen King and J.K. Rowling. When it comes to you yourself as the author, what would you say your books, in terms of genre or similarities to other authors, what would you say your books are?
Well, I've said this jokingly to some of my readers and even to some podcasters.
Mm-hmm.
I say it's as if Stephen King wrote Harry Potter, meaning when you read Harry Potter, it's very urban and I guess a bit innocent because it's written for a younger audience.
Mm-hmm.
Where my series, Boone and Jacque, it has a bit more adult themes and the um maturity of the subject matter I include is way more adult. In fact, a lot of the reviewers have said to me that this is not meant for children. Yes, it has young characters, but it's not YA or young adult. And it's not that I'm trying to say that no one who is in the youth should be reading it. It's more take it with a grain of salt that yes, these children are going through something rather harsh, and the adults are rather um, abrasive with their wants and needs and disregard to children. But the whole idea behind the series is that sometimes you have to rely on yourself and those who understand you. It's not always going to be an adult that will understand who you are and how to help you. And it doesn't mean that it's not possible. It just means that it's not always the case. And some of the people that have read my books don't understand that. They've actually said that this is not realistic. I'm like, well, it's fiction. It's not meant to be an accurate representation of modern society. It's basically different perspectives coming into one storyline. And it doesn't mean that I share those beliefs. It's me taking different, flavors and perspectives from other people. And of course, you know, whatever I used to believe is probably in one of those some of the characters. And all of that to say, this is not just about, children being children, curious or not curious, or adults being self-aware or not self-aware. It's just whatever is necessary for the story to move forward.
And I think between your book, Boone and Jacque, I can find a connection with it because when I finished my poetry collection earlier this year, a lot of people are actually asking me, why did you decide to write such a painful poem
Mm,
collection? And what they didn't understand is that it wasn't about me, because I found a lot of people are asking, oh, are you depressed, are you in pain, are you okay, should we help you? Because a lot of the poems you'll find that it's all about pain, it's all about aggression to something. And
mhm,
I told them that it was just me fitting into somebody else's shoes, trying to figure
mhm,
out what pain they're going through and trying to portray it in my own words, because I don't have to go through pain in order to write a book about pain. I don't have to believe in magic in order to write a book about magic. I do not have to actually have
mhm.
witnessed a crime in order to write a crime series or even a mystery series. It's
Yeah.
just me as an author tapping into
Mhm.
somebody else's mind, tapping into somebody else's shoes, and portraying a story in which I believe most people would enjoy, right?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'm working on a serial killer origin story. It's not like I have that instinct. This is about me.
And how's that going for you? Because for me, it's going terribly. I have a
Um,
crime mystery book on the works right now. I'm supposed to finish
mm,
it by the next year and
mm,
publish it by the next year, but it's not going on so well because I'm
mm,
not in the police force.
mm,
The whole thing, it's taking place in two different locations, so I have to understand two different cultures. I have to grow my character. I have to understand my
Mm-hmm.
character. So for your new book, stepping out of the whole fence of Boone and Jacque,
Mm-hmm.
how is your new book or any other book coming forth going to be any different?
Well, what I always do when it comes to any foreseeable project in the future, I try to essentially practice writing a certain character or tone in the current book I'm working on so that when I write the next book, I'm already practiced and have an idea of how it works. So for this killer origin story that I'm working on in like late 2023, what I'm doing now to be prepared for that is twofold. First, I interviewed two criminology professors, one from South Africa, one from Michigan, U.S. State, and then I also did my own research and watched a lot of true crime, Netflix series to really understand uh, how the whole searching for this killer works and how the law enforcement works and what do people find interesting, what is more poignant in cases, and how do you, I don't know, sensationalize such a story, because essentially I'm trying to do both. I'm trying to entertain people and educate people. So how they can do that on a streaming service is what I really need to know. Is how can I marry entertainment and education in a way that doesn't sensationalize in a very hokey way. Um, that is very difficult to do because you don't want to make the character goofy or over the top or boring or too meticulous. There has to be some kind of balance between entertaining and realistic. So that's why I interviewed those people to understand what I'm doing. And in practice of writing a serial killer, I in the last book of Boone and Jacque that I'm working on now, Sahan, I have this mayor from the fourth book that turns out to be a former member of a group of female serial killers that have since disbanded. And what's so ironic about that decision I made is when I interviewed the criminology professors, they told me that serial killers are always soloist. They never work together. They try to, and there have been attempts in the past in terms of known cases, but it doesn't follow through because eventually one person will become more egotistical, more of a monster than the other, and will not be able to share the glory, I guess. So in the final book, I show that through greed and power and bloodlust, this mayor goes insane, basically. And that kind of helps me with the premise that I've been trying to work on to make it unique for the serial killer story, which I have officially titled, at least for now, is called Black Rose Cocoon. And the reason why I chose that title is because it really encapsulates what I'm going for, which is kind of this, femme fatale kind of, I guess, mad woman that is going to see love as a weapon and as her weakness as well. And that means that every kill becomes more and more personal and more in depth to her character and her connection to that person. And it's not her way of ripping that love away from her. It's the opposite. It's it's her fear of letting go of love. That to her, love is always fleeting, and in order to keep it from fleeting, she has to, I don't know, guess turn someone that's real into a puppet, that kind of thing. So yeah.
And do you see yourself writing a different genre in the future? not necessarily similar to Boone and Jacque or your upcoming book, do you see yourself venturing into new genres in writing?
Yeah, I have like 10 different stories that I've been wanting to write for so many years. I just didn't have the practice for it yet. So now that I'm pretty much there, I have 10 individual stories that I'll be crafting. And I don't really have concrete titles or uh, ideas that are fully fleshed out, but I
Mm-hmm.
do have some ideas I can share with you if you like.
Mm-hmm.
So after the serial killer origin story, I'm going to be doing a brother sister adventure story, which is inspired by my relationship with my sister, which made her blush when I told her that. After that, I'm going to be doing a 3-in-1 fantasy story, but it's very different. It has some kind of connection to, actually, no, it has a direct connection to Boone and Jacque, but because it predates the world that Boone and Jacque are in, um, it's not going to have the same tone. It'll be more classical and royal and I guess a bit more like a classical composition as opposed to something fun and urban and familiar to most people. I will also be doing a detective novel called Myra, and I've been meaning to write that for a long time because I've always wanted to write this. And this is going to sound strange, but the way I described it to my best friend is a Frank Sinatra tone for the pacing of the story with a Western vibe. So this female detective is working on a missing persons case. And while she's doing that, she has this picture of what a gypsy told her was her true love, but she doesn't know who this person is. So, what's interesting about that is she doesn't really believe in love. So, even though that's true, she keeps that picture with her. So, whenever she's driving, she looks at this picture once in a while to believe in love. So, things like that. And I'll be writing a romance novel as well, one that I've been wanting to do for a very long time. And one more I can tell you. Um, it's essentially a twisted version or adaptation of the Notebook. I've always wanted to do my crazy love triangle. So yeah, that's a few ideas I have in mind.
Uh-huh. And I know there's something that a lot of writers go through, especially myself, writer's block. Have you had a phase where you just couldn't write at all, or maybe your ideas didn't work, or maybe you had a drain of ideas? Because for me, myself, I've been in that situation where I have a book, I've written, I've done the final draft, but when I come to review the draft, I'm like, no, scrape that all up. That does not make sense. And when I try to rewrite it, it just does not work. So for you, when it comes to Boone and Jacques, did you have a moment like that? Or in your new book, are you having moments like that?
No, because I learned through my schooling that that's not that's not real. Writer's block is not really real. It's kind of a myth because a writer's block is our anxiety and anticipation to the execution of what we're trying to create. It's not that you're out of ideas, it's that you have the idea, you just don't know how it's gonna appear on page. So when you're frustrated and scared and you don't know what to write, like I can't think of anything, it's best to just turn your brain off and not worry about what's going to come first. You just let it go and just write, because first draft is first thought. And what that means is you're not concerning yourself about what's going to happen on paper because you can fix that later. You can rewrite the whole thing if you have to. But you see, this is one of my strangest methods I've done over time, which is I rewrite a page like 5 times or whatever number it takes me to get there. Because to me, as long as I can write the first page in a way that I'm happy with it, it already sets the pace for what I'm going for in terms of the story I'm going to create. So I didn't really do that, honestly, with the first book of Boone and Jacque because I just wrote it. I didn't think. I was like, you know what? This is my chance to just not worry about when a book is done and just write it. And whatever mess I create in the first draft, I can clean it up later.
Okay, amazing. And there's something you mentioned earlier, and it's stuck in my mind until now. You mentioned that when you began, Boone and Jacque was not a genre that you expected you're going to do. You actually had a different thought about the genre you wanted to write. So when you had that initial calling to be an author, what was the genre you really wanted to write about?
Um, I guess thriller, but when I saw how colorful fantasy can start challenging myself from the beginning, that it would just create more opportunities and more skills that I can acquire over time. Because if you challenge yourself from the beginning, you're permitting yourself to have more tools in your toolbox that will grow and grow over time. If you start to, you know, label yourself as a genre writer, then you limit yourself to how you can create unique stories because then you're thinking, well, how do I keep this story and this genre? But that doesn't really work for me because genres were only created by librarians so that it's easier for readers to find the book in the store. Where me, I call myself a mixed genre writer. Yeah, my books are fantasy thriller, but that's just the two genres that stick out the most in terms of the strongest elements in my writing.
Andre, in terms of journalism and filmmaking, especially the aspect of filmmaking, because I'm a film director myself, if the
Mm.
opportunity were to be placed onto your lap, would you consider venturing in any of this?
For film, yeah, actually, I did a bit of screenwriting myself before I started uh being a novelist. In fact, I didn't want to write books before. I was so used to formulaic writing and being, passionate about, translating paper to screen, and it was just easier to, you know, only write what's going to show on screen as opposed to conveying emotion through backstory and really painting the scene for the audience. But when I tried my hand at uh, at writing novels, obviously at first I was just like, oh my god, this is so much harder.
Mhm.
but 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 the reason why I uh, wanted to do screenwriting in the first place is because I wanted to kind of do both. I went to school for writing, and then I wanted to go to film school after. But because it took me so long to graduate from my writing degree, I just let it slide, and then I just kind of lost focus. But yeah, I would like to try and get into that industry again in terms of writing.
And you mentioned that you've been to school for writing, especially when it comes to your degree, that's what you majored in, all about creative writing. Uh, if if in another world you didn't actually go to school to learn about writing and you were just this author who is just going based on their creativity on and based on what they've heard from other people, do you think your books would have taken a different route?
Yeah, because not because of the technical foundation that I acquired through school, but also what the schooling gifted me is my love of reading once again, because before I dove into, I guess, the second half of my education, um, I didn't really want to do any reading. I became so infatuated with the so I think that without my education, not only would I have not really understood the craft, but I wouldn't have um had the same kind of motivation and more. If you don't have a true understanding of storytelling, you have to educate yourself. Even if you go about it your own way, you don't have to go to school. You can look up books and online courses and just read books and write. But to have someone else who's far more skilled and practiced in the field is very helpful, because they understand what gets readers' attention, not in terms of what the market wants, but how you tell a story. Because it's not about you writing for a certain medium or writing for a certain audience. It's about finding what you want to write while understanding how storytelling uh, grabs a reader's attention. Because even if you want to write your own thing and find your niche, you still have to understand what will get someone to open your book. Because even if you love what you wrote, it doesn't mean that it's going to be really, you know, memorable.
When it came to you, what were the challenges, or maybe what were the solutions that you found when it came to publishing and marketing?
Well, I've always been a self-published author. And the reason being for that is through my schooling, especially my business of writing course, what we were really taught is that of course there's different ways of getting your book published, whether you do the work yourself or pay someone to do everything for you other than writing the book, or do a hybrid where you're only paying for services while being a self-published author. But when it comes to learning about the proper way to publish your book and market, honestly, to me, do it all yourself, or as much of it yourself at first. Because in order to get a traditional publisher to sign on to your books, you already have to have some kind of um, target audience and face in the world of writing, because they don't want just any book. They want money. They always want money. And
Mhm.
in order for them to make money, you already have to have enough momentum as a writer for them to go, okay, you have momentum, let's use that to capitalize on the audience that you've been able to attain and expand it as much as possible. Because without them knowing how they can make money off of you, or how they can work with you, they have no reason to do business with you. So you can actually stay that way. You can stay as a self-published author throughout your whole career. I mean, I'm pretty sure Lee Bardugo, who wrote Shadow and Bone, she was a self-published author for the majority of her books. I don't know if she got a publisher now with the popularity of the Netflix show. Um, but there are, authors that are self-published. Say the same thing as me. So just do your research, see what works for you, and ask questions.
What advice would you give authors out there, new authors or maybe ongoing authors? What advice from you as an author yourself, what advice would you give them?
Honestly, keep going, regardless of where you are in your career or how slow you feel or behind. I mean, my new book, or the fourth installment of Boone and Jacque, called Citrus Moonlight. I've entered that in like maybe 8 contests so far, and I've lost 4 already. But what's so ironic about those losses is that I actually value my work more, because it means that I've written something unique that holds value to me, and there's no um pandering to a bigger audience. It's something unique to my style and who I'm trying to, find, I guess, that likes my work.
Hmm.
So basically what I'm saying here as advice is value the work that you've created, regardless of who reads it or doesn't, or nobody, because you created something, and that's not easy for everybody. You know, people like to say anyone can be a writer. No, not everyone can sit and focus for hours and write something that takes a lot of work and attention. You know, my father asks me, why does it take you so long to write 3 pages? I'm like, well, first off, it's on a Word document, so it's technically six. But two, I'm not just writing like an essay. I'm including a lot of components that comes into crafting a story. People will think that you're just writing whatever idea comes into your head. No, there's so much involved in storytelling. And that to me is something to be valued, is the importance of understanding every single detail of storytelling, and understanding over time that there's more and more involved in storytelling, and even in poetry. I forgot to mention this. I took 4 classes of poetry in university, so I'm a poet as well. Um, that still takes skill too. So that's another piece of advice, is that you have skills. So how big of an audience you have. And if you're new to the game and you're an aspiring author, write for yourself. Do it in blog form. Don't worry about, profiting off of your work or hoping someone notices you. It's all about you finding the joy and the love in the world of writing. Because you have to ask yourself, what do stories mean to me? How do stories affect me? How do I want it to affect others? And of course, you want to affect them positively, or make them think about life. There's a lot of, this is going to sound very snobby, but there's a lot of crap out there that doesn't really mean anything to me. Like, stories, they should really, you know either shake you to your core or just burn into your memory. you know a world or a universe like Harry Potter is memorable and as big as it is because someone decided to create something unique to them, not because they expected it to be this world phenomenon. It just grew that way. So it could happen to anyone. And unfortunately, this is something that is another piece of advice that modern writers have to understand, is that unlike J.K. Rowling's time and Stephen King, you can't just submit a manuscript to several publishers and expect something to happen. You have to really put in the work, create an audience for yourself before any big name can recognize you. So don't write to get a big name to recognize you. Create something that is meaningful to you, and hopefully someone else will find meaning in it.
Do you think it's okay as an author to share your ideas with somebody else? Because I heard once before when I was beginning that I shouldn't open up my ideas to people, like telling them the draft or even showing them the draft before I get everything published. Do you think that's a good or bad idea?
Well, what I always say before you copyright anything is, if someone asks you about anything you're working on, you give them the vaguest idea of what you're doing. Because even if they steal that idea, until you actually put pen to paper, and even until it's going to be copyrighted and published, you can make changes. So really, it's not about saying nothing. It's more about, you're not hiding anything, but you're also hiding the uniqueness of what your idea is going to be.
Oh, okay. So when it comes to a best friend, is it okay to share with them, or maybe a sibling, or maybe somebody close to you? Do you think you can share your ideas with them? Because one, they are not publishing anything.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, with those people, to me, the people that are, I would say the most dangerous, but I would say if you are part of a writing circle, the only thing you should be sharing with them is advice, because anyone can give advice, and it can be wrong. You can have the best intentions, but if they're not as practiced as you or not as creative as you, it won't matter. It's just going to be more tools for them to use, and they might use it incorrectly. So really, to me, it's not about hiding things from writers or anybody. It's more like, if you know you have something good, you immortalize that before anyone knows about it. If you want to talk about it after it's been published, sure, because it's already out there. But before, eh, it's easy to steal things, so I'd keep it to yourself.
And are there any others out there who you draw inspiration from?
Well, besides Stephen King and J.K. Rowling, I did start to read this old book series called Shannara, I guess is what
Mhm.
it's called, by Terry Brooks. Um, I just started, so I can't really say if I draw inspiration from them. Um, who else do I read? Oh, I did read a few books of Redwall. It's an animal book series by Brian Jacque. But primarily Stephen King. There's something about the way he represents fear in a psychological and visceral way that has always been so interesting to me. So I took that approach that he has to not just fear but storytelling as well, of making everything seem human and grotesque at the same time,
Mhm.
and incorporated it into my writing.
And there's this thing that I've always heard about, especially for myself, not
Mhm.
necessarily only for Stephen King and the likes of R.L. Stein, is that authors can be dark. Because for me, I've had some people telling me, oh, those ideas are just dark. Those you
Mhm.
have a very dark, dark story. So do you think the dark aspect that every single author has makes books better? Because you'll find that no matter how soft a book might be, it always has the dark aspect. Let's take J.K. Rowling, for example. The book,
Mhm.
it might be nice, but it has its dark aspects. That's what makes the book better. So do you think for you as an author, dark aspects of a book make the book better?
I'd say so, because the important thing about storytelling is to find a balance between light and dark. If if it's sunshine and rainbows throughout the whole way, there's no there's no story there. I mean, the first thing you're supposed to include in the beginning of your story is conflict. There has to be something that the character wants, and you have to take it away from them. Meaning, let's say they have a routine life, and do you want to break that monotony in order to create some kind of change? Because that's really what you're doing in a story, is you're changing someone's life in order to either make them learn something about themselves and they change by the end of it, or they don't change, but they realize that the way that they are is for a certain reason. By force. And in order for that to happen, some kind of darkness, some kind of challenge, you know, it's going to happen. So, it's not that you need darkness, it's more that you need conflict and contrast that wasn't there in those characters' lives or even the world that you created.
Mhm. And for yourself, where do you see your books or yourself as an author being in a couple of years, not necessarily in the near future?
Where do I see myself in the future or for a couple books?
Hmm.
Well, when I said I had those 10 ideas, that's just what I've always wanted to do. Like there have been like unfinished film scripts that I've decided to turn into move to books. Um, but in terms of where I see my career going, and not just in terms of the projects that I tackle on,
Hmm.
but how I want to get where I want to go, I want to eventually get to a point where any of my books, whether it's a series or a standalone novel, becomes something adapted onto screen. Because I would love to see how someone takes my not just my stories, but what lessons I've incorporated into my stories and put it on screen. Because the thing about film adapting books into something on screen is they can only fit so much in there.
Hmm.
So that's where the danger comes in of, did you understand the book? Did you understand the story? It's not just about what looks visually mind blowing on scene. It's about, did you understand what this author was trying to do? And can you replicate that on screen while also incorporating your own vision? So that is something I've always wanted to do, to work with a film crew to see if they can uh, maximize the importance of my storytelling, because that is not easy to do, to take art that has already been created and somehow capitalize on its strengths and vision.
Uh-huh. And I actually left the last bit of this as the last one because it's the most important thing for an author and for you yourself. Who is your greatest support? Who would you say is the one person who will be your greatest support or your greatest inspiration apart from any other author? Who would be your greatest inspiration and support for all your books coming forth?
I would say my sister and my best friend. My sister, because she's not a reader, but she's always rooting for me because she sees how passionate I am about storytelling and how stubborn I am about making it as a writer. Because no matter how many times I submit my books to contests and I never win, or I win some, and it doesn't really help the progression of the amount of readers I hope to attain, I keep going. Because one of the biggest lessons I took from my schooling is that it's not about winning or getting there faster or seeing some kind of end in sight. It's about really understanding and valuing not just your work but yourself as a human being. Because if you lose yourself in the process, if you write while you're going through some kind of trauma, it starts to really influence your writing, and then you lose the original intent you had behind that. So having someone be there in your corner and keep you grounded as a human being is very ideal, because you don't need someone just for supporting your dreams and reading your books. You need someone that you have a strong connection with, that will be with you through thick and thin in life, because art is life. There's it's very cheesy, but it's true. uh for my best friend, um the reason why I know that he's going to support me is because, first off, he's gay, and he knows that I have LGBTQ characters, and he finds that very refreshing, because there's not a lot of writers out there that to try to incorporate those those kinds of characters in, I guess, older timelines. Because Boone and Jacque is set in the 90s. And although gay culture and support in that culture was known at that time, it wasn't as strong as it is now. But the universe I created is separate from ours, in which there is no discrimination, and the only way people judge others in the world that I created is through thought and action, because that's how we should be judging each other. There's no reason or justification to be racist or bigoted, because that's lack of understanding and lack of effort to be open-minded, you know. And of course I have characters that aren't open-minded, but I make sure that they're only judging someone based on their different perspective, not based on their disgust or disinterest in someone based because of the color of their skin or who they're attracted to, who they love, you know. um that's very important to me, and I'm always going to write stuff like that, regardless of what genre I write or who's the focus. And in fact, I'm doing a lot more female leads because I got so tired of, men being written like men, women written by like women. It's so stereotypical and rinse repeat kind of writing. So it's not that I'm going to make my female characters masculine or feminine. I'm just going to make them a human being.
And since we're literally in the few weeks of left in 2022, coming into the next year, what new projects or maybe new books would you be coming up with or maybe publishing in the next year?
The final book of Boone and Jacque will be out maybe springtime, because I'm like 40,000 words in. I'm aiming for 90 to 100,000. So probably by summertime. And then the serial killer novel late 2023 or early 2024.
Okay. And are there any maybe possible collabs that you wish you could have in terms of books? Because I've seen authors coming together and maybe two, three others coming together and creating a big book or maybe a series of a book. Do you think in your coming future there'd be any collabs with any others?
That I don't know,
Mhm.
because it's very hard to do that, because even if you have the same genre that you write in or style, you have different thought processes. So that's not really my forte. I
Mhm.
mean, I'm able to work with editors and illustrators, but I've never really worked with other writers. I mean, there is a possibility. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to it. I mean, it would be a very new field for me, because if I were to want to work with a team of writers on a TV show or something, I'd have to know how to do that.
Mhm.
If I'm designated one episode and someone else is designated another episode, I have to learn how to work with them. So I think it would just be a learning experience, not something I'm opposed to, just a new thing.
Okay, I think this episode will end there for today because it has gone long enough. But we'd love to have you back on the show, maybe
Sure.
in the new year after the holiday special is done. And maybe by then you'd have published your new book, and maybe we can get into those books directly, and we can
Sure.
dissect your writing process as well, because I think I think you can have a lot to tell us, especially me. I can learn a lot
Mhm.
from you because you've been to
Mhm.
writing school. The only background that I have in writing, it comes in journalism form. So and maybe my creative process as well, but I don't have any educational background on how to write or maybe what to do
Mhm.
after you've written or how to find
Mhm.
a publisher. I think these are things that a lot of authors need to learn, and
Mhm.
also learning how to work with illustrators and editors. So I think this will be a whole new episode when it comes to that. But
Of course.
thank you. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Andre.
I teach a bit of writing on YouTube actually.
Mm-hmm.
I do a bit of teaching of writing. So if your listeners and you want to learn about the basics of writing, you can go on YouTube and look up AG Flitcher, and that is my pen name. And actually, that is the same handle for all of my social media. So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube.
I'll just link everything in the description so that they can find it easily as well. And also the links to your books so they can find it, read it, rate it, review it, drop their comments as well. And also they can find your future books. But thank you so much, Andre, for being part of this year's holiday special. It's the second one to many more coming in the future.
Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.